Hello and welcome back to another video. It's certainly good to be back from past couple of weeks of finals and whatnot to begin regularly uploading on the channel here again. Today's video is going to be pretty hypothetical, but something I really wanted to talk about since I never get to talk about my home state of New York very much on this channel because there's nothing really politically going on in New York in terms of competitive races. I'm sure there's definitely competitive House races here and there, but overall, the state of New York is a very blue state. It's a state that Democrats, almost always win with, over, 58, 60% of the vote. There's not, statewide, there's not a whole lot going on in New York. But I wanted to entertain the idea for a second and kind of look at the odds of the Republican challenger to the current governor, Kathy Hochul, Lee Zeldin, and what his odds are for winning the governor's race. Can he even win in the first place? And what would the electoral map look like if he did win in next year's gubernatorial race? So the first thing I want to point out, and the reason I made this video in the first place, I wouldn't even be entertaining this idea, if this hadn't happened. Which is basically last November, the Democrats got, a pretty resounding defeat all across New York, specifically Long Island, where I'm from, which is a huge population center in the state of New York. If we go to the last presidential election, the two counties that make up Long Island, Nassau County and Suffolk County, are pretty purple counties. Obviously, Nassau County is a lot bluer, but in off-year races, it is usually a Republican county. Not statewide, but locally in terms of county executive and other races like that. It's it's still an old-fashioned suburban Republican county. And Suffolk County is really a purple county when it comes to statewide races, sometimes going red, sometimes going blue. But lately, in the past couple of years, it's been trending more Republican than it had in the past. Going back to the 2016 election, Donald Trump won Suffolk County, I believe, by 7 or 8 points. Which is, compared to Obama winning it by 2 in 2012. So a decent shift going on over there. But the reason I bring this up is because in Nassau and Suffolk County, there were two pretty high-profile races locally. That was in Nassau County, the Nassau County District Attorney's race, and of course the Suffolk County District Attorney's race. Both of these races were extremely high-profile because there were Democratic incumbents. And on Long Island and across New York, there's been a significant backlash against the bail reform laws that have been passed by the Democrats, I believe, 2 years ago. And that kind of went to really hurt Democrats last November because the incumbent district attorney in Suffolk County lost by around 14 points, which is compared to his previous victory where he won by over 20 just 4 years earlier, back in 2017. Tim Sini won by over 20 points. He got over 60% of the vote in a county that Trump won. And this time around, he ended up losing by 14. And in Nassau County, the result was even worse. The incumbent Democrat lost by 20 points, a 60-40 margin for the Republican. And that's her there, Ann Donnelly. So it really was a bad night for Democrats last November. But what if that momentum were to continue across the entire state of New York in 2022? And certainly, of course, if New York were to go red in 2022, it would be absolutely disastrous for Democrats, to say the least, and probably doom them in 2024 just based on that, morale blow alone. And, not that I think this is actually going to happen, but I want to look at what it would look like if a Republican won statewide New York and how possible is it. The last time a Republican won statewide New York was George Pataki during his third re-election back in 2002, in which he won a three-way race between a Democrat and a member of the Independence Party, who only garnered 33 and 14% respectively. George Pataki was able to get basically almost 50% of the vote, 49.4, and was able to win a re-election to a third term. Now, if we go back to 1998, there was a similar dynamic going on. Now, George Pataki was a fairly moderate Republican. I would put him in the vein of a Larry Hogan, maybe a bit to the left of Larry Hogan, more like a Charlie Baker type Republican, a socially liberal, fiscally moderate Republican, who was able to run up huge margins, not only in Long Island, but all throughout upstate New York. Basically, the only part of the state that was blue during his elections was the city, and even that case wasn't even that blue. And that's how he was able to win such huge victories. Now, this came off of the back of the 1994 Republican Revolution, in which, incumbent Democrats all across the country were basically wiped out by a Republican wave. And Mario Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo's father, was no exception to this. He was able to, lose. He was running for a fourth term. He lost by around 3 points. And some people speculated this was going to happen to Andrew Cuomo as well. Now, he didn't end up losing. He ended up resigning. But, if this trend were to continue, then Andrew Cuomo, based on all of the scandals that have happened, would have been very vulnerable. And I'm sure Republicans wanted to run against Andrew Cuomo because he is weak. He would have been a super weak Democrat. And even before 2020 and all that, he was in some decently contentious primaries. In 2008, in the 2008 governor's race, 2018, the race in which he ended up winning by, around 23 points or so, he only won his primary, I think, by around 10 or 15 points. So even back in 2018, that was against a more progressive candidate, Cynthia Nixon. Andrew Cuomo was still vulnerable among his own party and statewide. Now, in 2020, we have a state that goes, 23 points in favor of the Democrats. So, how would it even be possible? Now, of course, we look at a state like Virginia, which is only 10 points in favor of the Dems in, 2020, the election. We look at Youngkin's victory last November, at the same time as this red wave on Long Island, and Youngkin ends up outperforming Donald Trump by 12 points. It was a 12-point swing to the right. For something like that to happen in New York, you would need a monumental swing to the right everywhere. You need the city, you need Long Island to come in like 60-40 in Suffolk County, like 55-44 in Nassau County. You would need huge margins. Now, the one silver lining for New York Republicans that they have is that turnout is very low in off-year elections, very low. If we look at 2018, for instance, Andrew Cuomo only got 3.6 million votes. Hillary Clinton got about 5 million votes in the state of New York 2 years earlier. Mark Molinaro got 2.2 million votes. That's actually somewhat similar to the amount of votes Trump got in 2016. I believe he got 2.5. So Republican turnout is obviously much more stable than Democratic turnout in off-year elections. But yet, Democrats still dominate. Andrew Cuomo was able to win huge margins upstate and downstate. One of the reasons for this, I think, really was the blue wave that we saw back in the 2018 election. But even with that, a lot of these upstate cities, Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo, they were within 6 points. And a lot of that has to do with the Green Party candidate and the other third-party candidates. If Lee Zeldin were even to have a shot at the governor's race, he would need no libertarian candidate. He would need only third-party candidates to Hochul's left to try and out-left her somehow. That would be a gift to him. That would give him somewhat of a shot because that was something that helped George Pataki win back in 1994. It was a decent amount of third-party vote going away from Cuomo and going to him. Zeldin would need something similar for that to happen again. Now, obviously this is extremely hypothetical. Do I think Zeldin is going to win as of now? No, of course not. Just based on New York's, partisan leans itself. The only way for me to change that prediction even slightly, I'd need to see a lot of evidence, a lot of polls, a lot of momentum on Zeldin's side, and I don't really see that at the moment, even if there is discontent among the Republican base against Hochul, which there is a lot, but that doesn't really mean a lot when the Republican base in New York is around 36%, 36%. It's only about a third of the state, give or take a few points. So that's not really going to get you anywhere statewide. Now, had this not been a blue wave year, maybe it was a red wave year, if we take a look at the 2014 governor's race in New York, Cuomo only won by 14 points against a Republican named Rob Astorino, who is the Westchester County executive. Now, in this map, upstate New York is not nearly as red as it would have to be to get a Republican statewide victory. Not even close. Something else Astorino benefited from was a strong third-party candidate, Howie Hawkins, getting nearly 5%. I guarantee you nearly all that vote was taken away from Andrew Cuomo. Hochul would need a strong third-party candidate from her left, in order to lose next year, which I don't think is going to happen. I think New York is way too blue of a state. But as you're going to see as we go through this video, it's not impossible. It's certainly not impossible for a Republican to win under the right circumstances. But like we saw in Virginia, you really do need a perfect storm. You need a poor Democratic candidate, you need a strong Republican candidate, you need the right national mood, and you need the right electoral strategy for a blue state. New York is a very blue state. It's one of the bluest states in the country, consistently voting Democrat year after year after year, along the lines of states like, even bluer than Maryland. Maryland has a Republican governor right now. Massachusetts has a Republican governor. Vermont has a Republican governor. New York does not. New York hasn't had a Republican governor in office since 2007, and that was the last time we had any Republican statewide official. Now, given this map, you also have to keep in mind Cuomo was very popular at the time of this election. Though there was a red wave all across the country, it really didn't hit New York at all. Nassau County, which is, more of a purple county, Suffolk County, Rockland County, these counties that tend to be really close, barely went more Republican than they were in 2012. So you didn't really see a tremendous shift. But the main, benefit for Republicans is that turnout is always really low in off-year elections in New York. The only exception to that kind of was 2018, but even then, it was still pretty low. If Republicans got their overall vote share that they usually get, around 2.5, 2.7 million, this race in New York, certainly Republicans would have gotten like 40, 41%. It would have been a lot closer. So again, it's not an impossible feat, but you really need really depressed Democratic turnout for this to be possible. And again, the only reason I'm even entertaining this idea is just because Republicans did insanely well in suburban New York, which, really surprised me. I didn't think that was going to happen. I wasn't really following the local races, I guess, as much as I should have been. But because of that, because of the huge margins we saw for Republicans in Suffolk and Nassau County, I think it exemplifies a decent amount of discontent with the current state Democratic Party, at least among the Republican base and independents, enough to fire them up to vote in large numbers. Now, if we go back to the last time New York had a remotely competitive race, it would be the 2010 New York comptroller race. And if you don't know what a comptroller is, it's kind of like a state treasurer. It's a little bit different, though. This was a race where the Democrats only won by around 200,000 votes in a state, as blue as New York. Again, if we go to the election just prior to this, in the 2018 election, 2008 rather, we had Obama beat John McCain by over 2 million votes. So we go from 2 million votes to just 200,000. This is all due to turnout differential. The Republican getting around 2 million votes. McCain got 2.7 million back in 2008. Obama got 4.8 million. This Democrat only got 2.2 million. So a huge turnout differential. Long Island coming in for the Republicans. Basically all of upstate, we've got Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, all these populated areas coming in for the Republican. And it was a race where the polls actually had it somewhat competitive. In the end, the Republican lost, probably due to the fact that this was also a year where Andrew Cuomo won his first term as governor by around 33 points. He won almost every county in the state. So I'm sure that was able to carry Thomas DiNapoli over the finish line, to whereas if there was a weaker Democrat, perhaps Harry Wilson, the comptroller, might have actually won this race. Now, this was the last time New York had a remotely competitive race. It was 11 years ago, 12 years ago, once we get to the new year. So it really is a super rare occurrence in New York that we have a competitive statewide race. Something I want to point out, too, though, there were some conservative, quote-unquote, ballot measures that did pass statewide in New York last year. That's another reason why I want to make this. They had to do with redistricting, the power, basically restricting the Democrats' power to gerrymander the state, things like that. Same-day voter registration. They all failed in New York. I believe I covered that on my election night live stream. But all those proposals failed, and those were Democratic proposals. And if you look at the statewide totals, I think the total amount of people that voted in that race was somewhere around 3.5 million. there were around I think there were 9 million voters or 8 million voters in New York back in the 2020 election. So if we have low turnout like that again, it's certainly possible that Republicans have a decent shot at statewide office. Hochul, the current governor, is popular, though. She has around a 50% approval rating. To be fair, I think her disapprovals are higher. I'd say somewhere around 40% maybe 36, 38%. Given her latest indoor mask mandate, which, a lot of Republicans, independents, and even some Democrats are a bit frustrated with. But we're still over a year away from the governor's race. So this isn't really to cover the governor's race so much, but whether somebody like Lee Zeldin could win. And now finally, I want to get to this cool app called website called the Election Shuffler, which basically allows you to, shuffle around the results and turnout in certain counties. New York's turnout drop-off in off-year races is about 50%. You usually only have 53% of the people that voted in the presidential election or so voting in the off-year election. So in this map that I made, this was pretty hard to make. I had to, move some counties a lot further than the right than I think they would realistically go. But this is how red New York would have to be, hypothetically, for a Republican to win. Obviously, maybe I can make a place like Ulster County, which actually went red in 2014. I could make that red. There's a few things I could change, but it's a college town. So is, I believe, is Binghamton here? One of the big colleges over there. I think it's Ithaca, which is like a film school or something. But this is the kind of electoral map you would need for Republicans to win statewide next year. You would need a nearly 20-point margin in a place like Suffolk County. This was a county that Trump only won by 0.2%. He won by 200 votes here. You would need that county to go nearly 20 points to the right. You would need Nassau County to go, 13 points, more than 13 points to the right, 17, 18 points to the right. You would need huge shifts, not only in downstate. And by the way, I made these areas as red as they were. Basically, if you had a similar shift from last November's election in next year's election, you would need Westchester County to go about 40% for the Republican. You would need super low turnout in places like Queens, Bronx, all the boroughs of the city. And you would need Zeldin to do better there. You would need to get within 11 points of Albany, which actually is possible, believe it or not. If you go even back to the 2018 election, which was a blue wave, Andrew Cuomo only won Albany County by 12 points. Now, part of the reason for that is the third-party candidates, but in a hypothetical situation, you would need third-party candidates for a Republican to even have a shot at the race, and you need a Libertarian to not be in the race. So Larry Sharp, who's the he's the Libertarian candidate, he would have to not run for Zeldin to even remotely have a chance, even in the best case scenario. But this is the kind of map you'd be looking at. Basically all red, except Albany County, Ulster, and Ithaca here, upstate, and then of course downstate. You would need the suburbs to go strongly for Zeldin. You need Staten Island to go pretty strong, and you would need the New York City area to have fairly low turnout, and for Zeldin to improve on those margins. So it's a huge, tall order. Places like Syracuse, for instance, in 2020 went 58-38, a 20-point margin for Biden. You'd need that, you'd need to bring that to an R+9, which is very possible. Again, the turnout differential is huge, and it has a huge impact on how counties go in the election. But it's a tall order. You need Buffalo County to go, right by 10 points. You would need Zeldin to win that by 10 points. In 2018, Buffalo County went blue by around 6. You would need a 16-point shift, give or take, to even have a shot. And by the way, this is where Kathy Hochul is from. I think more realistically, she's going to win this county by more than most Democrats tend to, unless people in Buffalo feel she's not representing them anymore. But this is what a red New York would have to look like. New York is not as red upstate, which is seen as very conservative, as downstate Illinois. Not even close. Downstate Illinois, you have Republicans getting margins of 80%, 81%, 72%, 77% of the vote. Here in New York, the reddest county in the state only goes 71% for Trump in the last election. So there is a huge difference. But, that's really it. I just wanted to look at, Lee Zeldin's chances of winning and what the map would look like. Obviously, if you couldn't tell by the video, his chances are very, very, very low. Obviously, things can change. Kathy Hochul could lose her primary, maybe, although, that's very unlikely now that she's the current governor. And there's some Democrats running against her, but a lot of times I think the field is going to clear pretty quickly, and she's going to end up winning the primary by around 40, maybe 45 points or so. So, you know, she's likely to be the nominee. Zeldin is very likely to be the Republican nominee. He's basically been endorsed by all except like 4 or 5 counties in the entire state, Republican, the Republican parties of every county. So, you know, that remains to be seen. But again, this is going to be a super, super hard race for Republicans to win. This was just a very hypothetical video, just, you know, based on the 2021 Long Island elections, the big shifts there, and what those shifts would look like translated statewide. It would look something like this, and you would literally have the narrowest of narrow victories, an 8,000 vote victory for Lee Zeldin. Now, obviously, once you account for third parties, his margin of victory could be bigger, but as of right now, this is probably what it would end up looking like in a hypothetical situation for a Zeldin win, which would be very, very unlikely. So anyway, guys, thank you all for watching this video. I will be getting back to my regularly scheduled uploads right after the Christmas season, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Like this video down below if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any new videos that I put out, and as always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.